Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm Naveed Haq with the Caravan Podcast. Joined with me is my co-host,
Hamza Shahzad. And today we have a very special guest, one of my really good friends, as well as my brother, Mohammed Hassan.
Assalamu alaikum, guys. Very happy to be here. This is an amazing set, mashallah. I'm happy to be here for your first episode.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
I know I know Hamza has told a bit about what you do, and I will say, as a resigned pre-med graduate, medical school still my backup. Sorry, Mom. We'd love to hear about what you're doing, and I believe Soma Clinical Trials, right?
Correct.
So
yes.
Tell us a little bit more what that is, and
Sure. Okay. So I own a clinical research company. So we started, subhanAllah, almost 4 years now. Time has flown. I was going to say 2 years, and I realized I was wrong. What we do is I partner up with physicians in the area, usually in the DFW, which is the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex here. And we run clinical studies, usually for treatments and conditions that have no approved medications or treatments. And we partner with pharmaceutical companies or small biotechs and try to see if we can look at the efficacy of that medication, see how beneficial it is and safe it is for the patients, and also give patients an option for treatment without having to travel to maybe California or New York. And alhamdulillah, I've been enjoying it so far.
So you said 4 years ago,
Yes.
and I'll be honest, my brain stopped there because 4 years ago
Yeah.
was not the best time
Yeah.
in this world.
Of course.
So it's 2024 right now when this
Yep.
is being aired, and 4 years ago, roughly, or pretty much start of COVID,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so starting a business specifically in the healthcare space seems like a great opportunity, but it also seems really scary because I feel like there's a lot of doubt and
A lot of
fear
unknowns.
from maybe not investors, but at least from people, right?
I agree.
Why did you jump into that?
You're bringing back some emotions. So, subhanAllah, the way that it worked out was very interesting because February of 2020, the 27th of February, I left my job. So
Wow.
I was planning to work at a smaller research company. I worked at UT Southwestern, which is a medical school and hospital system in Dallas,
Right.
as a researcher there. And I was talking to a family friend who had a research company, and he offered me a position, and I decided to leave my job. And I left with a bit of a cushion before my start date, and COVID came. So I remember very clearly being home in between jobs, and COVID comes, and the studies that we had that I was hired for at that company were pushed back. So I'm basically without a job from February until almost July, August, wondering why did I leave my job. Alhamdulillah, things worked out, alhamdulillah, and I ended up actually getting to do a lot of COVID clinical trials. Okay. So I worked in a hospital as one of the research leads there in Mesquite, actually, and we were running clinical treatments and trials for patients that had COVID. And usually patients that were hospitalized with COVID had acute COVID. And we were there, maybe like 15, 16 hours a day, like long days and long nights. And I really learned research then. And I was thrown into what I think was the most difficult way to do research, was inpatient studies. And it opened my eyes to, realizing that it's something that I could have done myself. And I can, open my own business. And alhamdulillah, a few months after that, I started my own company. Had the idea to do it a while before that, but I told Hamza this story, and a few people already know this, but it just happened to be, I go to a masjid in Richardson called Mass. So Mass Dallas, the headquarters and the main chapter is in Richardson. And we had a Fajr event over the weekend, and I think it was Fajr and then like maybe coffee or Fajr and something, an activity afterwards. And I was introduced to a physician that's at the masjid by one of my halaqa leads, right? And he introduced me and said, this is a brother that does clinical research. And that doctor, who actually I ended up working with and partnering with, is my first business partner. His mouth was like, he's like, I've been trying to get into clinical research for the longest time. Wow. So subhanAllah, I'm looking to get into, to start my own company in this field. And I'm like, how am I going to find doctors that want to do research with me? Like, what's the first way to do this? Yeah. And so I go to Fajr at the masjid over a weekend, and he's there and he's interested. And that ended up being, I met him maybe December of 2020. And by February, we got our first clinical study with Eli Lilly Company for a fatty liver treatment. Wow. And since then, alhamdulillah, it's been a blessing. It's been a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this business has continued to grow. We have multiple locations. I started a second company and added a very good business partner, my best friend, actually, one of my very close friends, actually, and a pharmacist. And we've been growing since then, alhamdulillah.
Wow. You know, there's so many questions on my head that's coming in right now. But one thing, I want to test this theory because I feel like whenever people smile, particularly Muslims, whenever they smile the most is during one of the most challenging periods of their lives. And you smiled a lot when you quit your job at the very beginning, and there's all this uncertainty and this cushion. Now, do you have a wife? Are you married? Did you have a family at this time? Was it all you? Like,
I am married,
Yeah.
alhamdulillah. And actually, that summer, right before I started the job, so during that break, we found out that we were going to have our first kid.
Wow.
So it's a very scary,
big news right
scary
there.
time.
man, I'll carry the boats.
Subhanallah. Yeah, legitimately,
Oh
man.
my goodness.
So I remember just like being super excited and like very happy for the news.
Yeah.
And then also at the same time, like, what's going to happen? I have no idea. Like, I knew the studies were starting, but they kept getting pushed back. I don't know what's
Right.
happening. Do I still have a job? But alhamdulillah, it ended up working out. Of course, there's many nights of dua and tahajjud and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a way out. But the reason, of course, I think the reason we smile is not only because you look back on it fondly because it taught you sabr, right? It taught you faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also like understanding that regardless of what happened, at the end of the day, I'm very happy that it happened. But even if, la samahallah, my business doesn't go forward and it fails at this point, it's still successful for me. I put my faith in Allah and we went through it, right? So it's Ashura, right? There's two very important tales and stories from today. One is Musa alayhi salam, who was successful against Fir'aun. Second one is Al-Hussein, who was martyred.
Of course.
And both are stories of victory.
Yeah.
Right. So whichever way, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written for you, whatever way it comes out, even if I never started a business or was never successful, whatever happens to me, it's as long as I have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I accept what He is, you know, willed for me, alhamdulillah, it's successful. So I look back at it fondly knowing that, but also at the same time, as I was going through it, it was scary and stressful, and I'm grateful that I'm past that point.
No, I mean, I think it's so beautifully well put, and I think often when we have challenges or hurdles, you know, we ask Allah to remove them, right? But I think to the story of Prophet Musa, it's, you know, Allah parted the Red Sea. He didn't remove it, right? And so the only way through difficult situations, frankly, is to get through it. But in remembrance of Allah, and it seems clearly that you had that, even though, you know, of course, as a man, being the leader of the household, but also being a provider, you kind of maintained your faith through it and just kind of trusted that what you were doing is building towards something bigger.
Exactly. Also takes a very good partner and spouse that's, you know, willing
Yeah,
to support you through that period, right? So alhamdulillah for that as well.
Absolutely.
So in terms of like this time period where you're like really challenged and like going through these different experiences and a lot of uncertainty, you know, in hindsight, you know, anytime you look back, you're like, yes, I had faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever happens, happens. Well, was there a time period during that transition or that thought process that it was really challenging? And can you talk a little bit about that where you were like, man, like, you know, I'm not sure what to do or how to do it. Was there like a very, like where your faith was really tested? And was that something that kind of happened to you throughout that journey?
So a few times, and I think I alluded to it earlier, when the studies were pushed back. So my start date for this job kept getting pushed back, and like alhamdulillah, I had savings, but I wasn't the best saver, right? So like the money that you have pays for rent and the things that you need, but like you're looking, and I'm like, it's going down, and these dates for my first day of started working are, you know, getting pushed back even further. So at that point, I think it really, I see a correlation between getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, getting more involved in the masjid that I was at, which I'm still, you know, alhamdulillah, halaqah lead there now. I was sitting in a halaqah there with at Mass, but now I lead one with a bunch of kids from high school and college. Seeing those things come out from this difficult point, I see a correlation between that and then also things becoming more solidified. Alhamdulillah, now we have a start date for these studies. My first day of work is here, and like things got easier. But I think it really required transparency with your family members, letting them know, hey, this is happening to me, so you can be vulnerable and let them know, like, I need some support here. And then also at the same time, not losing faith. Because whatever happens, inshallah, I felt like I was resourceful enough that I would find something, even if it wasn't this thing, and not making sure that I tied everything to one, plan. Because if it didn't end up working out, alhamdulillah, there's another avenue that will open up. I'll go to masjid another weekend and I'll find somebody else there that's starting a business, and inshallah I'll do it. Also, my backup was med school, so maybe I'll apply to med school and inshallah have to go through that grind.
Not a bad backup.
No, it's not. It's a very difficult one. It's not like it's an easy, I'll just do it. But still, I was like, maybe I'll just have to grind for that one.
Yeah, I think, well, let's go into that, right? Because I think many of us, first generations, I think there is this obvious push towards being, a physician, an engineer, or a lawyer. All these are wonderful and incredible careers, right? Yep. And it seems like you were on that path. What made you switch from, being a frontline physician to going more on the clinical side of things? Was that something you discovered in university, or was it, much later on?
So after I got married, actually, it was funny. When I told my mom I wanted to get married, I had just, I came back to Dallas. I lived in Toronto for a year. Came back to Dallas to do a master's program. And I'm like, Mom, I want to get married. She's like, with what money? Like, what are you going to do?
How old were you at this point?
24.
24,
yeah,
okay.
24. She's like, how? How is this going to happen? So, alhamdulillah, I ended up getting a job. Working in a lab. And, it's research. It doesn't pay that well, but it's a living, alhamdulillah.
Right.
So, and I realized I needed to get married, so I save up for the wedding and all that stuff, and now I'm working and supporting a family. You realize that it's not that easy to go from working to being a student and going through that. So just from a practicality perspective and understanding the rights and responsibilities that I had as a man in the Muslim household,
right,
I didn't think it was feasible at the time to be able to go through that perspective, that job or that career. My mom always wanted me to be a doctor. Alhamdulillah, now I think she sees the blessing and the benefit of different career fields. Having said that, my younger brother is a physician, alhamdulillah, and the youngest brother is now going to law school, inshallah. So she got her kids succeeded in those fields, mashallah. So, and I'm married to a lawyer, so I think she's happy about those aspects.
Man. Bless our parents.
So they push for it, but it's honestly they want the best from us.
Of course,
right? They know this is a safe thing. Right, they took the risks for us. Think about coming from a country that doesn't speak English primarily, coming to a country that they've never been to, maybe a country that has done nefarious things in their homeland, and they're coming to live here with kids that don't speak the language either. That's the risk, and I understand that their perspective was I took the risks to have a better life for my children. I know being a doctor, I know being a lawyer, I know being an engineer will get them comfortable to take care of themselves, have a good family, and be a good Muslim without having to stress about finances. So it comes from, I think, a place of caring and love and not wanting us to deal with the things they did.
Yeah, I think, whether it be our parents or whether it be us as Muslims and how we view the ummah, we just want to make sure we carry the baton forward, right? I think that's the ideal goal from a family unit, and then, of course, as greater, even in this podcast, right? I hope we're the least successful Muslim podcast from here on into the future, because I want the future generations of Muslims to do it better than we could ever do it, right? And so it all comes down to that intention of how can I make that candle be brighter down the road.
Of course.
One of the things that I think kind of gets overlooked sometimes in business, particularly in the West, is as Muslims, it can be challenging doing things completely the halal way, right? We have the best of intentions on doing that. Now, of course, my background is not in clinical studies. I can tell you the challenges when it comes to maybe, when starting a restaurant, right? Do you want to sell alcohol? Do you not want to sell alcohol? If you want to have a convenience store, there's all these other challenges that pop up, right? Obviously, you shouldn't sell alcohol. So just to clarify, for in the clinical trial space, was there something that you're like, I can't do this, and it felt like a huge wall in front of you? How did you overcome that?
It started off there's three things. I think at the beginning, whenever you start a business, the easy way to go through it, especially I remember going into Chase and opening my business account and them offering me a line of credit, trying to do things in a way that does not use leverage, right? So I don't have a fixed income at the business yet. I'm not making revenue. I can't take this line of credit out because I know I'm going to pay interest on it. So first thing is trying to do your best to stay away from the haram in that way, right? And then the second thing is I really saw it, especially when we were applying for studies, because in the beginning what happens is you're a new clinical research company, and maybe you have personal experience doing studies, but your company is not known to these pharmaceutical companies. So you pitch yourself to them. All right, I have this experience, we have these facilities, we have this physician, we would like to do research with you. And I would basically email maybe 100 emails a day to these pharmaceutical companies. And out of those 100 emails, we get a few back, all right? And I remember seeing pharmaceutical companies from certain countries all right, that have, biotechs there and a lot of tech space there, and knowing that, hey, I'm not going to apply or work with these type of companies. And I've had them, not only did I not say I don't want to work with them, I remember in the beginning when we weren't really getting that much, work, those pharmaceutical companies coming to me and being like, hey, we have this study here, which looks very nice, but I'm looking at them and I'm like, I will never do business with you.
Yeah.
All right, for the sake of my brothers and sisters overseas in Palestine. I don't know how political you want to be, but
we want to be. If it deals with the ummah, we're dealing with the ummah.
Of course. So Israel's known as a country that not only has a lot of tech, but also a very large pharmaceutical space that's there.
Right.
And knowing that was my red line was very important to me. I, of course, don't discriminate with employees, but alhamdulillah, it's worked out to the point where most of my employees are Muslims, so we have the same mentality.
Okay.
We have other non-Muslim employees that work with us too, but we have a common, agreeable, set of principles and beliefs that work together very well. So we know where not to work with, what not to do when it comes to business. And then also, not only do we draw the line with that specific country, but there are other countries as well that I'll be a little bit more ambiguous about that we don't do business with. Okay. And I think having that perspective and doing it for the sake of Allah, thinking that if I do this, it's something that's pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think that's helped us be, continue to grow and continue to be successful. So that was the two things. One is trying to stay away from interest as much as possible. And then two, alhamdulillah, my business is not one that really requires leverage or interest or loans. And two is avoiding working with companies that don't align with our principles and belief, and then also actively harm our brothers and sisters overseas.
I know one challenge or a practice that I have now more than ever is, I do my best on this. If I'm going somewhere new to eat or a new restaurant to go to, right, I'll either do, that brand name space BDS, right, or something, right? Because for me, it's like it's the only way I can really do anything, right? Especially here in such a privileged position in America. In the clinical space, are you like, what is the extent of research there? Because I imagine those are very niche, big, industries, right? They're not like the KFCs or things like that the everyday person knows, right? You could probably name the top 3 pharmaceutical research labs, and I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. It sounds like something from Resident Evil 4.
Fair. Yes, yeah.
But for you, do you have to dig really deep to find out those, red lines? You're like, oh, wow, like I had to go 5 layers deep to figure out I can't do business with them.
Yes, so sometimes the company will not even be based in Israel, but the founders will be.
Oh, wow.
Or they'll have a lab there where they do some R&D there. So at that point, you not only do you have to go through and look at where they're founded, or I've done searches so many times looking to see where is this company from, where are their founders from, do they have financial ties with this area. And if they do, of course, we don't work with them. So yeah, of course, it's not just figuring it out. But the main pharmaceutical companies we all know, Eli Lilly Company, Pfizer, Novartis, like these major companies, they're based in America or they're European. So for the most part, I'm okay with those ones.
Right.
And then also we have biotechs, and alhamdulillah, America's a land of business. Many small biotechs and labs have developed molecules or drugs that they're working on, and at that point, I have no issue with them moving forward.
Now, I feel like in my social circles, majority of doctors are Muslim. Has that been I feel like everyone has like a secret advantage in a business or space, right? Has that been beneficial for you, at least in your experience, or has that not been so much the case?
Yes, alhamdulillah. Actually, almost all of the physicians I work with came from referrals from the doctors I started working with.
Oh, that's perfect.
So we have the same network, so it works out well. I do work with a non-Muslim physician as well, and it's as long as the personalities are amicable, the deen helps. Having somebody to alhamdulillah pray salah with. We do just jama'at at work. We have 5 or 6 of us that pray together at the same time for dhuhr and asr, depending on what time of year it is. So that's really helpful. It also makes our discussions, because the physicians I work with are not my employees, but they're like business partners in the fact that they're contractors with my business. So whenever we negotiate things, going into it with the sense of, hey, this is still a Muslim brother that I'm working with, it makes those discussions so much easier. I've done negotiations with non-Muslims. It's not as easy, right? At the end, sometimes we'll be just going back and forth on something, and then, hey, Salat al-Asr came in, let's go pray.
Right.
Or, hey, let's just refocus. Or we end our meetings or discussions with dua. All right. So it's really helpful because it centers that. Because at the same time, I own a business. I want to make sure that I am not only fair to the person that I work with, but I also don't want to lose too much in my negotiations, not only with pharmaceutical companies, but anybody I work with. So it's like a fine line because you have to be fair, right? Especially when they're Muslim. You don't ever like want somebody to think that you've done them wrong, even because a dua of somebody that's oppressed has no barrier between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Right.
And if you oppress somebody in business, it's not only going to harm your business, but we'll see what happens to your personal life as well. So I try my best to.
Yeah, I think oftentimes something, that helps me. It's, it's I feel like there is this, I don't want to say stereotype, but there's this idea of, and maybe this is the Western mindset kind of crumbling in here. It's like, how can I get the best deal for myself, right? And I think in this sense where you're talking about you are working with someone else who is Muslim, right? I find ease knowing that, even if they make more, even if they get a sweeter deal, at the end of the day, they're going to do zakat too. Their pool of donation that they're going to do is now a little bit bigger because you didn't get too greedy with your pool, right? And knowing that they are Muslim, you also know they're going to use that money in a halal way, right? And I think keeping those things in remembrance of like the money doesn't stop there. And also more than anything, the money at the end of the day isn't ours. It's Allah, right? It's the risk that we were given, right? So it's an opportunity Allah is giving you to not be greedy, right? Whether it be donating or when you're doing business with other Muslims. Now, I want to rewind the clock a little bit because I know you guys met in college or before that even.
Yeah, college.
Yeah, university. I knew of him though, maybe from like people in high school. But yeah, we officially met, I think, in university. Yeah.
So I'm curious to know about y'all's relationship because I've known Hamza, I guess, as you finished college or right when I got there. I forget. And I've always seen you very entrepreneurial, right? You had mentioned that you were in the medical route, wanting to be a doctor, which my brother's a physician, alhamdulillah. And, it's a very structured process, right?
Of course, yep.
Do the work and you'll get to success, right? There's not a lot of gambling per se as just starting a business, right? How were you in college? Were you a risk taker in that sense? Or were you like, I'm going to do OChem, see you later, Hamza, right?
I balanced it out a little bit. I would hang out with the guys, but of course, like certain classes, I'd of course focus on it. But I think, subhanAllah, the year that we were at university, I feel like we went into UTD, or the university went to University of Texas at Dallas, with like, whoosh, exactly.
Unfortunately.
With like, mashallah, no, honestly, I'm so grateful because there's a group of guys that have affected me positively from my life since then. So I think I was very like lost when it came to even my understanding of the religion, what I wanted to do, trying to figure out who you are, trying to figure out like trying to be a people pleaser sometimes, trying to act cool, figuring out like, okay, this is what I think people will like, so let me be it. And then seeing guys that accept you regardless of how much money you have, how much swag you have, any of these things, right? They love your personality, they want the best for you. And being, amongst a group of guys like that, Hamza being part of that group really made sure that I was going to be successful one way or another, right? Because I had these guys to guide me, alhamdulillah, and be a place of support. And alhamdulillah, I think the group of guys that we had, all mashallah, are doing really good things, and and I'm very proud of us, alhamdulillah. Yeah, but I met Hamza sophomore year. Was it?
I think freshman year.
Maybe freshman year.
But like what you said is very, very true in a lot of circles, right? Like having the ability to have access to like a network or community that like understands, like you even talked about it in like your working environment, right? Like having a shared framework is like so easy to make quicker decisions and get aligned and keep things moving quick, which you need when you're entrepreneurial, you're running a journey. But then also like for your own personal development, like if people can just understand you, like because they know like your intentions in the right place, you're trying to do the right thing, then you can you're more at liberty to kind of be more comfortable and push your own boundary and kind of be yourself. And I agree. Like I feel like the group of guys we had growing up, it's like that's what it is. It's really and honestly, that's something that we're trying to do here with this podcast as well. It's like I think the journey that you've had, and it's been really awesome to hear it again. It's very unique that a lot of the fear, a lot of the uncertainty, it's unique when you are dealing with just yourself. But the reality of the situation is that there's so many Muslim entrepreneurs out there that are probably going through the same exact thing. That I can probably guarantee you are going through the same exact uncertainty. And having that access to that network, we're trying to rebuild that in a more Muslim entrepreneurial lens. So I think it's going to be very exciting, honestly.
Inshallah, it's a great thing. Like, again, we are very entrepreneurial. All right, we're discussing just even at the time of the companions. You brought Abu Bakr radiallahu an.
Yeah.
All right, I think of the story of Umar radiallahu an, how he had a business partner, a companion, where they would take turns. On days they would be at the business and days they'd be with the Prophet ﷺ.
Yeah.
Right, just like the fact that they would balance
That's
those
pretty
things
cool,
out.
though.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, all right, you got the business. Yeah, I'm
Let
going
me
to
go
hang out with the Prophet.
Let me go with the Prophet ﷺ. And then we think of even the generations after, remember Abu Hanifa and his business and how he was known as an honest business person.
Right.
And it's a very blessed thing to be. So having halal rizq from Allah SWT, working in a halal way, you need friends that guide you before you get to that point so that you can make those decisions properly. And you need a support group of family and friends that'll get you to there.
It's amazing because, even in the call to prayer, right? It's literally telling you, come to success, right? And you mentioned that when you went to prayer for Fajr is when you met one of your main business partners,
and
right?
Fajr too.
You were wanting success in this dunya, but by you focusing in the afterlife, making sure you're pleasing Allah, I was like, I got you.
Alhamdulillah.
You're gonna find a person who thinks like you, believes like you, prioritizes like you, but it can also help you in this dunya, right? And so I think it's so amazing. Community is such a big part in our deen. It's a big part of our deen that I think is oftentimes we take it for granted. Being in Dallas, Texas, of course, because it's so accessible and we think it's always here. But I grew up in the corners of East Texas in the 903. I love Texarkana, all right, but population of Muslims there was literally 4. It was just my family, right? So, very much absent-minded. My intake was literally just what is on the news. And it seems like community played such a pivotal role for you to building that inner confidence, right? Not only in your religious identity, but your values, your ethics, that eventually, when came the opportunity to do business, to pursue something with so many red lines, so many hurdles, whether it be riba, whether it be, like you're saying, you having to potentially do business with people who are hurting the ummah, right? But it gave you the unmovable confidence in yourself and your faith that you knew you can get through it, right?
Alhamdulillah, of course, yeah.
In terms of building community, finding those people, right? How did you go about acquiring that, finding that? Was it just luck, or did you kind of go out of your way to seek those types of individuals, like people like Hamza and others that you were surrounded by?
I'm sure you could find a lot better.
No, alhamdulillah, man. Hamza's been, man, some days I just go back and I sit down at the end of the days after we're going through our group chats and just hanging out, or we have a hangout after a while. A lot of us are married with kids, right? So we don't see each other as often. So it's just going back and being grateful for that. But for me, it was luck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we started a fraternity at UTD, and I met these guys through that, a lot of the guys, and got to know them better, through that. And it was a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Welcome back, everyone. We did take a little bit of a brief pause for Salah, but we are back on. So let's jump right back into it.
Alhamdulillah. I remember you telling me last time we met you were interested in starting a restaurant.
Yeah. Yes, I am quite the foodie. Like everyone else identifies themselves as a foodie. Inshallah, that's definitely a pursuit I want to make. I think right now there's such a strong business case, I think, for DFW, for restaurants in general, Muslim-owned or not Muslim-owned, to be Zabiya halal. I think the multiplier is something I really am curious to study on because you mentioned you were in Toronto, and I was in Toronto briefly for about an extended weekend. And it was harder for me to find non-halal food than finding, non-halal food than finding halal food. It was the first time where it was like, and you could go to any random mom and pop, Asian restaurant owned by, some first generation, Vietnamese family. Usually what I'm used to seeing all pork. And this one, it's all zabiha. And so it's just, it was incredible. It just made it so much easy. And every restaurant was packed, like all the time.
With
right? Muslims.
Yeah.
Everyone's eating.
Everyone's
right?
eating, but the Muslims are there.
Exactly.
You get, a big percentage of people
higher
coming.
quality meat, too.
Delicious food, too, man.
Do you know why that was the case in Toronto specifically? Is it because there's a large Muslim population?
There's a large Muslim population. It's very diverse, right? Like you have Punjabis, Hindus, like everyone is there.
Or halal just tastes better?
Yeah, but I think in Dallas, Texas has fact check me on this, but I believe Texas has the largest Muslim population in the United States.
Wow.
Right? that is a huge business opportunity for a lot of restaurants to take heed and focus on that.
Of course.
And I think, especially now, Michelin, as of today, been announced that they're expanding into Texas, which is huge for a lot of restaurateurs here to kind of get that official seal of approval from a culinary standpoint of globally that Texas has incredible food, which it does. Texas has incredible foods. Houston has, again, as a Dallas person, Houston, you guys got incredible food.
Not a good city.
No doubt.
Not a good city.
Yeah.
The food there makes it worth it.
I know they're still out of power, but we're
let me not hate on them for that point. We're rooting for you, Houston.
Yeah, we're rooting for it. Anyway, it's just a category 1. So anyway, enough about food. But Hamza, I think I want your brain on this because you're very much on the business side acumen of things. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, what I would like to do is really like learn a little bit more about like your business, like what type of relationships you're usually dealing with, how it's structured, like a little bit more surrounding like if. Let me put it this way. Let me take a step back. If I was someone who wanted to essentially come and I'm a med student right now, I'm not sure exactly where I want to go, and I want some optionality of some things, and I've got an entrepreneurial spirit. What was someone like that like to learn and know? Like, how can they onboard into this clinical trial space? Is there some like insight that you can first provide to that, and then maybe we can get into a little bit more of the meat and potatoes?
Yeah, sure. I think we'll discuss relationships a little bit into this point. But in the beginning, it's first of all finding a physician you want to work with. And there's a lot. Trust me, I've been approached by maybe 30 Muslim doctors that wanted to research with me. I just take it a step at a time. I want to grow in a halal way, in a way that I don't skimp out on the research that I'm doing, or ruin the name of my company by doing subpar work. So I take it a step at a time. So finding physicians, which there's many. If you're Muslim, you can find them at your masjid.
Good plug. Did you have like you say there's access to so many physicians that are constantly wanting to do the clinical trials. Was that always the case, or did that just happen after you did your first business?
After I started, but it started actually no. Even when I was looking to do research, once the physician I work with realized that I do research, they were like, I want to do research, and that's usually the case because the pitch that I give the doctors is you have a degree that you worked minimum 8 years for. All right, you did undergrad, then you did 4 years of med school, but then you did residency as well, and you want to leverage this knowledge that you have, the ability to care for your patients in the way that you do, in more than just this shrinking field of medicine, because not pharmaceutical companies, but insurance companies are paying physicians less, so they're seeing less revenue, but people are still paying exorbitant amounts of money. So it's a way for the physicians to find out a way to leverage their degree and their knowledge and their patient population without doing that much more work. I usually pitch it. It's 5 hours more work a week for you, and it's very good income for you as a physician. So it's very easy for doctors to get into it as long as you're willing to do a few more hours of work a week. And it's a way to do halal work, right? It's not, you're not doing something or opening a business that might open you up to non-halal earnings. And for me, you're working with a Muslim, and for the person that may be watching this, you pitch that specific point because it really makes it easier, because you're going to do, as long as you're somebody that's guided and uses the deen as their guide, they're going to do research in a good way. Because there are some stories of people that do research poorly and they get found by the FDA and things go wrong. So being an honest person really helps, because then you really build the trust of these doctors. But after I started and they realized that I've been doing research for this many years, they're like, I want to get into it. How can I work with you? So it helps, of course, once you get your foot in the door and people see that there's a successful avenue to follow, then they want to work with me. So, but in the beginning, you can find multiple doctors, many doctors that are interested in research. You just need a good game plan for them.
So if I'm a physician, like, what does that like? So for someone who's like non-medical, doesn't come back from that background at all, doesn't know how the industry works really well. So what does a physician actually do in relationship to your business today? And let's go through there.
All right. So there's a few models, but the one that I currently use, it's the easiest way to start up with the least amount of capital to begin, is I usually will rent out space either in the clinic of the physician or right by the clinic of the physician, so that we're close by. The physician is what's called a principal investigator, right? So they're a short PI. They oversee the conduct of the study with regards to patient safety. So making sure that they review labs, right, which they normally do. They do physical exams, which they normally do. So it's all within the scope of what they normally do. Then also having knowledge of the medication, right?
And these are usually new, or talk a little bit about how is it different than what they do today? Because there is a unique factor.
There is, because these medications or these study drugs are what we call them investigational products. They are medications that aren't approved, so they've never given it to a patient before. So they have to review previous data, so previous studies, to see the safety aspect of the medication. And know, medications that or what we call concomitant medications that they cannot take. Right, so you can't take Tylenol if you're taking this. Right, so it's just making sure the physician understands that. And my job is to convey that information, give them that information, so that when they're caring for their patients, so they can have that knowledge. But usually, and for the most part, I recommend if you want to start research with a physician, you start off with later stage studies. So clinical research is in phases. Right, so there's phase 1, which is usually inpatient studies for maximum tolerated dose. So for non-cancer studies, usually we know that you can only take 4,000 milligrams. It's actually changed recently, but 4,000 milligrams of Tylenol a day, because somebody that was healthy went into a hospital and they stayed overnight, and we gave them medication to a certain amount, and we realized we can't pass this level, right? So that's the first phase. Then there's phase 2 and 3, where we look at safety and efficacy with the medication. I usually like to work in this later half of stage 2 and the beginning of stage 3, because those studies, we already have a very good safety profile. We know how the medication works, and usually those studies have a large global pool of patients that they've been enrolling for. So I recommend people start with later stage trials when they're starting.
Is there less risk associated with those later stage trials because it's already gone through?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so then we'll get into this at some point, but in terms of your growth strategy, is your thought process to actually get into those larger verticals or earlier stages at some point, and are there major barriers to that? Because the closest thing I can relate it to is when a VC's funding a cycle, right? There's it's a completely different animal to invest in a seed company versus a Series A, a Series B, and a Series C. And then going public is also different, right? And they're specialized, and even in between their specializations too. So is that a good comparison, you would think?
Yeah. So you usually start off with later stage trials. Sometimes people start with phase 4 studies, which are post-marketing studies, which means the medication has been approved, it's already being prescribed to patients, but there's a label on it that they want to remove, that they don't think should actually be there. So they're trying to do extra research to see if this is actually the case. So sometimes people start with those. I didn't start with those. I started with phase 3. But phase 2 and 3 is usually the easier studies to get into. Phase 1, and actually my goal is, and alhamdulillah, we were approached recently for a phase 1 trial, you have to have an inpatient facility and a 24-hour facility to be able to do that. So my job now is to look for one and try to contract with a hospital or a medical center that's willing to do the study with me, which I never thought I would say, by the way, a few years ago. Because one of the things about business, by the way, and I think the biggest tip I can give you is anybody that wants to get into the business is you have to find a way. Yeah. There's so many times that I've been approached with something that I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this. How am I going to find this facility or be able to get this imaging center to work with me or be able to get this surgeon that wants to do these procedures with me? And then, alhamdulillah, I just keep knocking, right? I keep knocking on doors and trying to figure out what to do, and I find a way through. So and it's hard to switch over, by the way, from a 9-to-5 job, right? Or normal standard job where you have a task, or if you don't have the ability to do it, you go to your manager, and then if it's able to work out, it's able to be worked out. If not, then you kind of leave it. So, and going to something where I have to figure this out, right? I have this study that's here that I think is promising, and I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll figure it out. So finding a way to not take no for an answer, or not even not take no for an answer, looking at something that looks like a mountain and being like, okay, let me piecemeal this and slowly find my way up the hill.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's very similar to almost every. I mean, the core of it is it goes back to the earlier discussion we were having, right? The core of it is if you have tawakkul, if you have faith, if you have this base foundation of look, whatever the result is going to be, that's really not up to me. I'm going to try and aim for what I think is a good result. But, whatever ends up happening is going to be the best for me. But what can I do today with what I do have available? And that's just a framework thought process, right?
Regardless of business.
Regardless of the business, regardless of what it is, because you're going to be put through if anyone asks, this is the reason why our parents want us to be engineers, lawyers, and doctors, right? They don't want us to go through that type of stress. There's a lot of stress.
For someone else.
But for like that medical student that hopefully does turn, hears about your story and goes into like, hopefully like comes to you as a mentor, hopefully one day, inshallah. But like going back to that, like what would you suggest? Like, so going to the masjid, trying to be like entrepreneurial, having the right mindset. Are there other things that you think are like good? Like, what did you do early on in your journey? Did you like research like the pharmaceutical industry at large? Did you like look into like, okay, what is this relationship? Like, what were some of the steps that you initially took? Or did it just kind of all happen in place and it just kind of sequenced that way?
If I went back in time, I would have done the first thing, right? The former, I would have done the research to find out, because also there's almost like a barrier to get into clinical research, is because everything uses acronyms. Every single position in research.
That's not just unique to clinical, by the way. It's like every
position,
company.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that's the case. So they just make it like, okay, this is the club.
This make it sound smarter than it really is, right?
It keeps you employed.
Everything, yeah. The PI is a physician. There's a sub-I, then there's a CRC, there's a CRA, there's a CRO. All of these like are different names for either people or companies, right? So, and the pharmaceutical companies are called sponsors. So I would have done that to see, okay, hey, Pfizer has this specific type of position, and this is the person I want to get to, because they all have different names, strategic analysis, whatever, pharmaceutical. There's 50 different titles, and I know, okay, I want to look at the clinical developments coordinator, for example, and this is the person who gives studies, who approves sites. This is who I should reach out to. In the beginning, I was just cold emailing everybody, right, sending all these emails and sometimes calling, and those are fun. But I did that in the beginning, and then as you go, and I think with every business, you become more efficient, right? Now we're at the point where we get reached out to by pharmaceutical companies to do studies. Alhamdulillah. So based on the studies that you've done in the past. Part of it, I think, and I think it's necessary to get to the point where you have to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work, right? So not to be efficient. Maybe I would have kept it the way it is, alhamdulillah, because I did the hard work and I saw what needed to go into it. And at that, now I'm like, okay, let me figure out processes to grow. So every business requires the founder, exactly, right? The founder to work late at night. Sometimes before we had so we have something called monitor visits. We have to have our data verified by the pharmaceutical company or somebody contracted by the pharmaceutical company. So somebody has to come by and confirm that we did the work we say we did. And our first one was the day after my son was born. Oh, wow. Yeah, so my son's born, and I'm like, man, he was born at like 8 p.m., alhamdulillah, and they're coming the next morning. So I asked my wife,
I saw you that day.
The day, exactly, yeah, bro, like 5 a.m., I had come right back I work in Denison. Anybody knows the DFW, it's like near Oklahoma. Right? Basically, it's 20 minutes. I can, exactly. So I had to drive. I left at like 4 a.m., drove up there, took care of the paperwork, made sure everything was good to go, and then my employee, who, inshallah, she started like a month before, had no experience, did a good job in holding the pharmaceutical company and like giving them the documents required. So there's been many nights where I've been up to like 3, 4 a.m. or reviewing documentation. So that's, I think, necessary in the beginning, because you figure out how you want to move forward, but also gives you like skin in the game with the business, right? It makes sure that you stick with it. Right? Everything comes easily for you. You're not gonna really care. You're not gonna have the love for your business, and see the benefit that you've brought to your family and yourself, but also the employees that you have, and then alhamdulillah, the patients. Some people, subhanallah, like have conditions where they didn't know they had. They got treatments that weren't approved yet, at the right time, and I've seen really big changes. So it's been a blessing to do that. But I think it's important to grind at the beginning.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting thing, because there's one thing that so like when you're starting your journey, like I often think about this, like, because there's been a lot of like ventures that I think everyone's tried, right? Sometimes it's like, if you knew how difficult it was from the jump, would you really start it? Like sometimes that ignorance piece, and like you're talking a little bit more about rolling up your sleeves, and I think that that's always good, because even before you like have someone doing that role, like you doing it is going to give you the perspective and knowledge like to the nth degree in your specific industry, and then you can always like kind of, okay, how do I scale? How do I grow? But like in that beginning phase, it's all about learning. It's all about like getting in the weeds. So like if I had to take a step back, like there's a lot of stuff you said where I'm like, oh my God, that's a challenge. That's a challenge. That's a challenge. Like regulation. Oh, I got to like now like deal with like people like putting some drug into something that's not FDA approved. What does that mean? Okay, I got to go find a 24/7 clinic. Like there's so many uncertainties all the time. And maybe this is just my my personal inclination towards the medical industry. I don't know much about it at all, right? But like, if you think that you knew about all those challenges from the beginning, do you think that would make your life easier, or do you think it would actually like deter you away from like, oh, this is a massive problem? Like, speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm happy not knowing before I start, right, and tackling them as I go through it, right? Because I think if I were to see this came up and this came up and this came up, without knowing, like, okay, so if I knew these difficulties were coming, without knowing, panel, I still remember the first day we got our first contract from a pharmaceutical company. I remember, like, I have the image in my head coming downstairs, walking down at the old place I lived, like, going to tell my wife, alhamdulillah, we got it. I was, like, very nervous about, whether or not we were going to be successful. And getting the first one, I saw some light. So knowing the difficulties without experiencing those, wins would be impossible, I think, right? You need to go through it in that time frame of, okay, I went through all this difficulty trying to find pharmaceutical company, trying to find a doctor, trying to find a facility, trying to find a centrifuge and a minus 80 freezer and all these things. And then, alhamdulillah, we get centrifuge is used to spin samples of blood, and then we can,
Like
assess them.
I'm still on food. We're all fasting, so that's probably why.
Oh man, I was coming soon enough. So if I didn't see or experience those, good moments in between those difficult times, it would have been really hard. Yeah.
It probably makes it taste sweeter too, right? Like you blood, sweat, and tears, and
I mean, there's there's what Imam Ghazali says, right? It's patience is bitter, but it bears the sweetest fruit, right? And I think it's in that process gives you that larger appreciation for it. And I think similarly, like, when we make dua for something for a long time, and then we finally get it, it's like, alhamdulillah, right? You had that patience and bear through it, and Allah placed you in a position of readiness where you can take it on. And sometimes I'm confident in saying that if we start any of our entrepreneurial journey and we got the biggest client that it takes us from 0 to 100, we would fail immediately because we just did not get the battle wounds to maintain that client, right? And so it's a very short-term gain at that point, right? And so much of this journey is that, building yourself up slowly so you can get those right opportunities when you're actually ready for it.
Of course.
And I think we often tend to be eager on those wins, but everything is in the decree of Allah, right?
Of course.
And so it's like you're always winning. So wherever you're at, you're exactly where you're meant to be because Allah has already decided for you, this is what's best for you, right? And so focusing on your controllable variables. One of the things that you talked about that I'm kind of curious on, because it seems like you're working with doctors, right? Is this like another way for them to make supplemental income essentially on top of their main practice? Are you working with, like my brother's an anesthesiologist and a pain medicine doctor. So, or is it any specific type of practice? And so they have their main clients and then they'll work with you on the side and then you guys are doing all the lab stuff. I'm curious, like, what is this structure look like?
So there's multiple structures. So people can have standalone clinical research sites where they partner with a physician that comes to that site and we bring the patients there. Or you work in a clinic, so say a physician has a clinic, they have their patients there, and there's just a way for them to leverage that same patient population on a business perspective. And also from the perspective of a healthcare employee, a healthcare worker, I have so many patients, and doctors have so many patients that have many conditions that have no treatments that are approved for them. Giving them an option to, hey, we have these studies, and a lot of times I sit with my physicians and I say, hey, what do you want to do research in? What do you think would be really good for your practice? Do you have, like, I'm not going to apply for a hepatitis B study and you only have one hep B patient, and then just overlook a diabetes study and you have 1,000 diabetes patients that aren't getting treated properly because the medication doesn't work well. So it's trying to figure out what type of studies would be best suited for that practice. There's many pain studies. Most of the studies I work with are within the metabolic space, so a lot of liver conditions, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular, so things like that. But I have other studies in GI, AFib, asthma, things like that as well. So it's a little bit, it really varies. There's research in everything.
So this is like a great opportunity for physicians with their own clinics who are already practicing.
I would recommend every doctor to do it. I'm telling my brother, as soon as you finish residency and you start and you have a practice, do it. Because it's not that much. Of course. This is how, by the way, this is how it works. Just randomly I tell people about it and like, hey,
I don't know, this is a thing.
I'm a doctor, or I know a doctor that'd be really interested and want to work with you, and then they pass the contact on to me.
And it sounds like from the doctor's perspective, it's very minimal work, and you're actually enabling your patients to have another option that they wouldn't have otherwise, right? Or at least have the choice to make a decision, so I actually want to get into a little bit about like, have you been in business long enough to see like go from trial to be a successful drug, and like talk a little bit about like basically the impact of like patients actually going in and what that means for like the industry at large?
Yeah. So we have actually, the first study I started working with was a medication to treat what's called NASH, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is fatty liver disease, which is usually caused by patients who have type 2 diabetes or overweight. Patients get fat deposits in the liver, and it causes scarring, and that scarring causes liver cirrhosis. So it's actually the leading cause of liver cirrhosis in the country, but it's a very difficult disease to deal with. And we gave them a medication that had really, really good outcomes for the patients. Changed their lives. They lost a lot of weight. Their diabetes under control. And the medication hasn't been approved for that condition, but has been approved for other conditions. And patients are able to get that off label now too. So it was cool to be in the research phase of that medication, and now it's in the market, and people are able to get it prescribed. And like I very distinctly remember patients that I met like my first week of work, working in research, that ended up qualifying for the study, and then a year and a half later, when they're done with the study, they look completely different. Their liver looks completely, improved, and they're like thanking me. I didn't do anything outside of me starting a business. Exactly. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And seeing that was very rewarding, and understanding that, okay, alhamdulillah, something that can benefit people, right? So it really is nice to be in those research studies, which is why I like to do studies at phase 2 and phase 3 in the beginning, because you get to see that work out. I've been on studies that don't get approved, or I'll be doing, and everyone's like, I don't think this is working that well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what happens in that environment? I know you can't talk about a specific case, but like what happens? Like, is it that the results are not, like, if I was a patient, unless if I really needed it, right, or there was like not a lot of options, I would be really hesitant towards like taking a experimental, like,
Of course.
Pharmaceutical drug.
Right, launch to be like, yeah, let's try this new risky thing, unless if that was like, yeah, or limit. So, like, talk a little bit about your patient pool. Like, what does that look like? Is that like people that are like, are they really like in a position where they have to take this, or is it really like, are people like saying no, like the result of this is going to actually help drive better studies and better, like, what are most of your patients like? And I'm sure there's like a mix, but if you could kind of talk through that.
So there are many patients that are, I have a condition that maybe has a treatment, but it's not been working for me, and I need to find something that might help me. But even if it doesn't, at least I give data to the broader scope of research on this condition. And I hear that daily. So what we go through is, whenever a patient is identified as a potential candidate, either they call us, or we reach out to them in the clinic, or we call them and they come in. We do something called the ICF process, which is called informed consent form. So we go through a 20 to 25 page document that's in like layman's terms, non-scientific terms, that speaks about the medication, the study itself, the side effects of the medication, any benefits we've seen in the past, so previous data as well. Patients get stipends for being in research, so what the stipend is, and also they're told how voluntary research is. At any point, anybody can withdraw from research. So letting them know that as well. So discussing the aims of the study, the safety of the study, and then also the confidentiality of the study. We don't, publish any data about any patients. Everybody's known anonymously in research. They're very informed, and a lot of times you tell them, go home and think about it. Sometimes you go through an ICF process and it's like, I want to sign up right now. And you're like, no, how about I give you this document? Yeah. You go home, think about it, talk to your family. Like, you have a wife at home, you have kids, whatever. Discuss it with them if you're interested in being part of the study. We think it's a good option for you as a patient. Our physician thinks it's a good option for you, but it's your decision to make. But even if you sign up for it and you withdraw a day later, it's perfectly within your right to. So having those patients is very convenient. But then sometimes you have patients that are, they see one aspect of the study drug, like, oh, this makes me lose weight, I'll join.
Ozempic.
So it's a really varies in the type of patients, and you have to be able to be as transparent and clear with them as possible when you're selecting them for a study.
I feel like you kind of opened this up a little bit. Scaling, right? Scaling is a huge issue, obviously, it seems like all industries. What I guess what is the biggest hurdle for you in scaling? Because it seems like you have a lot of physicians who want to work with you, but you obviously have the bar of your ethical standards and things like that sifts through or filters through.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of holding you back from going into that next wave for your trials?
For me, it's manpower. So the way that we work is so in the beginning, I did everything.
Mm-hmm.
I did the blood, I did the assessments, I put the data in, shipped the samples, everything, got the patients in, like all the stuff. And then we hire what's called the clinical research coordinator. They take care of each of those things. So I do a lot of the high-end stuff, high-level stuff right now. So I do a lot of the contracts and budgets. I'll review data and talk to pharmaceutical companies. But the goal is to identify somebody that's a coordinator and give them tasks and increase their capacity as you see the fit, and then they can become what's called a clinical research director.
Okay.
So I need a director. So basically, it takes a while for somebody to be trained and be proficient enough in working, and we see that they'd be somebody that can run a site successfully. So at the point, what we do is we get our coordinators, we train them. When they're successful, they go and become directors, which is a really good method of promoting somebody, because they get a new title, they lead a site, a very large salary increase for them, and as long as they show the capability of being responsible in doing it. Yeah. So it's right now the main thing is manpower.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked a lot about business. We talked about your early entrepreneurial journey. Obviously something that's very important to all of us, though I'm not there yet myself, family. Being a husband, being a father, being a community member. I mean, you're wearing a lot of hats, right? And there's a lot of responsibility on you. Of course, keeping other people employed is part of that.
Yep.
How do you juggle everything, and how do you navigate that?
Alhamdulillah. So I think I got my eyes open to it pretty recently, because I remember I just got back from Amman. I was in Jordan for about 2.5 weeks. I did a trip to Turkey and Jordan, and my wife and kids are still there. Oh. And I was looking at this time while they were gone. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be so productive. It's like my vacation after my vacation. And then you realize how much you need them. Wow. So like I viewed it. I'm like, I got to review this contract and budget, but I got to do nighttime bedtime for my son, right? I got to do this bath time. And by the time I'm done, I'm exhausted because he asked me 50 questions. And I'm like, I can't be successful or as successful as I want, because this is more important to me anyway. But still, I'm viewing it as like a barrier to the business, right? But one that I accept and I would never change, and it's important. But now that they're not here, I realize how much the emotional support of your family really helps in your growth, right? I don't think my business would be anywhere near where it is, or even succeed or start up, had it not been for my wife. So having her support, her words of encouragement, her advice, and also I'm married to a lawyer, which is very convenient, because she reviewed all my contracts when I first started.
It's one way to outsource it.
Yeah, that's why he's really good with his words too, by the way.
So I have to manage what I'm saying, bro. But yeah, like it was a source of strength for me. Right, my wife was there for the beginning where it was extremely hard, and alhamdulillah has always been there to support me and give me advice, and give me really good advice. So I viewed it like sometimes like my kids are taking up my time in a way that, but I'm choosing to like I could be a deadbeat dad and just go stay at my work till like 10 p.m. Right? But I'm like, no, I got to go home and see my children, and they're a source of happiness for me. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, but that means I won't be able to do the work that I wanted to do at night. But now that they're not there, I'm like, man, I really wish they were at home. My house is so quiet. Like I'm like mooching off these guys. I'm like going to Hamza's house.
Sleepover? No.
Legit. I texted them like, guys, I'm so bored. Time is moving so slowly for me. So it's a source of strength, and it's a source of blessing, right? To have children, to bring them upon the deen, to have a wife and support her, and of course I have my mother and father as well that are there, that are support for me as well. So. I think it's really important to maybe if you don't do it in the beginning of the business, work to have a family, and don't view it as a way, a barrier to success. It's something that helps you because they're a source of motivation, a very big source of motivation, but also a source of support when you're having a difficult time. Say, alhamdulillah, sometimes you don't get studies that I really wanted, and I'll go and play with my son. Don't even think about it anymore. Right? So, alhamdulillah, I have 2 kids, a daughter who's 3 months, a son who's 2.5 months, and I've been married for just about 6 years now.
Wow. I think it's so true, and like I'm not married yet, and make dua for me.
Inshallah.
But I think so many young men, and men in general, I'm qualifying myself as a young man even though I'm 30, is that I think there's this perception maybe of where, oh, I need to have everything figured out, my finances. You kind of alluded to it earlier in this conversation when you wanted to get married at 24 and your mom was like, you and what money, right? It almost seems like getting married and all these things and all these fears you have of this dunya, right? The reality is when you find that commitment, that right partner, it's actually serving as an amplifier of getting you where you really want to get to. If you could give yourself advice back when you're 24 and you were worried about not having everything together, but you obviously still wanted to get married, what would you tell yourself, knowing what you know now?
So I grew up with only brothers, so I'd probably give myself advice on how to like live with a woman. That's like my advice, because I even though I was nervous and I was struggling to be able to get married. I knew it's what I wanted to do. So I would not. There's nothing I didn't need to give myself a pep talk.
Perfect.
So alhamdulillah for that. But yes, like even if you look at data, by the way, married men outperform single men in every category, right? So. Get to that point. So like legitimately, like even especially at later ages, right? When they're older, married men do much better in their 50s and 60s and 70s, health-wise, financially, happiness-wise, as opposed to single men, right? We view our wives and our children like as people we have to support. They're supporting us. We're doing way better, and actually, the data shows that women do a lot better single than men do single. Like we really need. Married women do better than single women in general, but we need women and children and a family and a support system more than they need us.
Absolutely. I think I read recently that if, when you have a wife, you should kiss your wife for at least 6 seconds, because statistically, it'll allow you to increase your longevity by 4 years. So
how do they get that?
Yeah, dude. First of all, how did it? You're talking to a clinical trial.
How did they get that data?
I know. Just believe it, all right? Kiss your wife, all right?
Yes. It's also a balance point, right?
Yeah.
Right? You don't like again. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tulhikum amwalukum wa la awladukum an dhikrillah. Do not take your wealth and your children as distractions from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So it's of course like you legitimately and like sometimes
Billboard.
like I'll be playing like my son, bro, when he was a toddler, it was so difficult to pray when he was near me. He's still a toddler, but like it's very hard. But it's like a little thing, but you have to get khushu, find a way to push through it. But like they're blessings, but they shouldn't distract you from your overall mission. But as long as your mindset's okay, you're doing these things, you're playing with your children and teaching them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to follow in the footsteps of the Prophet sallallahu and to make yourself be a man like the Prophet sallallahu, then that's okay. But if you're doing it just for heedlessness and just play with them and get joy out of it without any benefit, you're not going to benefit your kids, and also there's going to be a distraction from Allah which will end up harming you in the long run.
That's so true, and the constant tawakkul of Allah is so important. Everything that we're doing, right? Even when you're working, you're doing it for what? Whether it be for your family, the ummah, like there's so many layers to it and so many untapped blessings that you can get from every action that you do if you just have the remembrance of Allah in mind constantly. Now, obviously, family life, very, very important. How do you have fun? Do you have fun? Is that a thing that you do?
I have a lot of fun. Especially in the beginning, maybe when the beginning of the business, I was very busy, but still had time for fun. But you always, by the way, like people will be like, I'm so busy. Like I know people that are doing their like first year residencies that are working like 80 hours a week that still have time to at least have a moment for themselves. So regardless, you always will have time. But I watch football.
You're a Titans guy, I've heard.
Big time Titans
You're wearing
fan.
a shade of blue here. We tried to make the
two-tone
lighting.
blue. I saw.
Sorry about that, by the way. It's where all the wide receivers go to retire.
Exactly, bro. It's like the Florida for receivers, right? Just go there, have their beach home. But hey, I'm looking forward to our team. We'll see how it goes. But I lived in Nashville for 2 years. My dad was going to Vanderbilt University getting his PhD. When we first moved from Kenya, we went to Tennessee, and then I moved to Canada, grew up there.
You were in Kenya too?
Yeah, I was born in Kenya.
So you were in Kenya, Tennessee, Canada,
Texas.
Here.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Man, you have a larger ship route than shipment from China that's coming through, it seems like.
Yeah.
How is all, I mean. That's
and he's Somali.
Yeah, and I'm ethnically Somali. I'm not even Kenyan, yeah.
So episode 2 is going to be about
a travel channel.
yeah, it's like Indiana Jones.
Alhamdulillah.
That's amazing.
But usually Somalis are like, we're nomadic people at heart. So I think you'll find Somalis in like Switzerland, bro, and Sweden. So we're just everywhere. Yeah, I think like as Muslims, by the way, everywhere. You'll find a Pakistani guy everywhere. I find like a Desi restaurant in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, so
that's valid. Yeah. That's valid. Well, I know we're going to wrap up here, but there's one question that we want to ask you, and I think this is something, it's something that we always sometimes get tasked with, right? As success comes, the dunya gets, it gets more attractive, it gets more alluring, right? And alhamdulillah, it seems like you've had a lot of wins, right? And a lot of losses too, but you're in a good place now. How do you balance not getting so distracted from all the beauty of this dunya and stay focused on the true goal for all of us, is in our deen and growing closer to Allah? How do you navigate that? And what advice would you wish that you had in the beginning that you kind of figured out in the trial?
Well, I grew up without that much, alhamdulillah. Like my mom was a teacher and my parents live overseas, so I didn't grow up with money, so it was something that was new to me. But I think the moment that you start feeling an attachment to this wealth and the good things in this world, regardless of how much money you make, by the way, that's if you make $20K a year, you make $5 million a year, whatever it is. If you look at that paycheck and you feel something in your heart that's taking you away from your goal, which is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to find yourself in a good place in the akhirah, then you have to like that. For me, you donate at that point, right? All right, this wealth or these things I'm viewing as like, this is nice, right? Even like if you look at something for too long, right? The Prophet ﷺ if he was like complimented on his clothing, we have narrations where he would give it away, right? So, and also like we know narrations where he would tell like, there was one time where he was complimented on a red, alayhi salatu wasalam, he was complimented on a red thobe he had, this red cloak he had. He said, Wallah, the handkerchief of Sa'ad, who's a companion who died at the battle of Uhud, is far greater than any of his clothing. Like regardless of this dunyawi things, like a grain of dust for somebody that succeeded with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is better than all the wealth in this world. So understanding that, then I brought up the verse earlier. The verse goes on to say, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tulhikum amwalukum wa la awladukum an dhikrillah faman yaf'il dhalika falaysa wa man yaf'il dhalika fa ulaikumul khasirun. Like they are the losers. Like you will lose even if you think you have all the money in the world. You see all those zeros stack up. How many stories do we have of these celebrities and these athletes and these people that find money and they become ultra rich but they're depressed, right? Or they go towards drinking or drug use or abuse. Like they go to so many things to find an avenue out regardless of how much money they have. It's nothing but a means for you to find the salvation in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Using your wealth to do good, providing for your family first and foremost, giving to the community, and then at those moments, and then for me, employing people, having people on your team that benefit you and benefit your business, and recentering your intentions at all those moments. So whenever you feel that the sweetness of the dunya, trying to stay away from it because it's a slippery slope because you could just fall off the edge very quickly. Yeah. It's really, really difficult. It's okay to have passions. It's okay to have good things in this world, right? But at the same time, it shouldn't, obfuscate. It shouldn't be it shouldn't allow there to be a barrier between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think that's the most important thing. And I think as you go in life, you realize, hey, I made a mistake here. I should have given more last year, or I should have given to this cause, or I shouldn't have been this stingy with this employee on their bonus, whatever it was. Then you work to fix it. You realize where your faults were, you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, and then you work to better yourself in the next step.
Well, there's nothing more I can say. I think that wraps it up perfectly. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining for our very first episode of The Caravan, and it was wonderful to have you, and inshallah, I'd like to have you again.
Alhamdulillah, I was very happy to be here. It's an honor. Yeah, very nice to be here.
Thank you, Mohammed.
That's it for this episode with Mohammed Hassan with Soma Clinical Trials. Our goal is to get an episode like these out every single month, interviewing entrepreneurs that are Muslim who've made their success and can teach us and many of the ummah about how to balance the deen and, of course, your business endeavors. Join us next time, inshallah.